Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this man back. I can't call him sheriff anymore. What is that? Mark, what is that I can't call you Sheriff Mark Lamb? I guess I could. Would we say Sheriff Mark Lamb retired? What would we say?
You still use sheriff. Like I call sheriffs that haven't been sheriffs for 20 plus years. You still call them sheriff. It's kind of like,
Okay.
being a doctor or judge. You kind of carry it with you for a long time. But I am getting used to the former part. That one's a little weird. It's
It is.
with everything going on. I'd still love to be in the fight. I'm doing the best I can from a civilian standpoint.
By the way, Sheriff Mark Lamb, Pinal County, Arizona, he was term limited, so he couldn't run for re-election. You couldn't run again, right?
No, I wasn't term limited, but when I ran for the U.S. Senate, I had to
Gotcha. You
pick
couldn't
one
do both.
together. And I picked the U.S. Senate. I lost. For everybody out there, I lost. And so I couldn't do the sheriff thing again. And so my last day was December 31st.
Is that the future, by the way, Sheriff? Is that, are you political? Are you somebody who wants to work on closing the border? Do you want to do something in media? What's the future for you? Because I think the sky's the limit. You know that I feel that about you. What's the next step?
Well, I appreciate that, but I'm not a politician. I'm a patriot who loves God, family, freedom, and the Constitution. It's why I'm into politics anyway, because I thought law enforcement needed better leadership and people that would stand up for what is right. That's how I became a sheriff. Then I thought there was problems at the federal government, so I ran for Senate. But I think I'm going to stay active in border stuff. I'm working with FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, which does great work as far as policy for immigration, border security.
Right.
They're working on mobilizing more sheriffs to be involved in this.
That's where we met. At the FAIR event in Washington. It was almost 10 years ago, something like that. It's a long time ago. But they do a great job, and I'm glad that you're affiliated with them. Let's talk about the sea change at the border. I'm hearing numbers from Caroline Levitt of 90, 93%. One person said 95% lower illegal crossings. You're still in Pinal County, Arizona. Is that what you're saying? And the guy who's the sheriff now is the guy that you endorsed, right?
Absolutely. And I just talked to him and our chief deputy.
What's he saying?
And they said that we're not seeing the human load vehicles on the I-10 like we used to see. We are still getting a few drug loads here and there. But what we're seeing is what's being pushed. So I'm a unique county because I have an Indian reservation on the south end of the county.
Right.
That actually had no wall whatsoever. It's just like wide open. So the cartels during the first Trump administration pushed people through there to the point where we would have more apprehensions than a border county. They're going back to that now, Joe. So we're seeing that. But I talked to the Yuma guy. He said he had 9 in one day. Daniels is having a lot of success over in his area in Cochise County. So right now it's working good. The messaging's landing and the enforcement of the law is landing.
Have you talked to Border Patrol agents? I know that you know a lot of them, or those who work for either Border Patrol or ICE in general. They've got to feel like somebody in Washington has their back now, right?
Oh, absolutely. We were just at a National Sheriff's Association conference last week talking with Border Patrol, ICE, all of the federal partners. They're loving it. They're able to go out and do their job, especially Border Patrol and CBP and ICE. They're able to have the handcuffs taken off, and they're doing what they were actually got into this job to do, and what they're good at. And so they're loving it. It's a lot of work. This last administration let, at minimum 12 to 15 million people come in.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work to do. And
I think that's probably a low number. Marco Rubio says it was 11 million in before. Like back in 2016, it was already 11 million. So add on to that what the past 4 years did. He thinks it might be as high as 20 or 25 million. Would you be surprised if it were that high?
No, I think the number in America that are people that are here illegally is probably 40 to 60 million.
Wow. Can you imagine? Now, you've dealt with drug cartels a lot. You've dealt with what they do: human trafficking, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, all this stuff, and then some. A lot of that money flow, billions, I think it's 13 billion a year, something like that, has now been stifled because Trump said we're not playing this game anymore. But they're adjusting. They're not going to stop their dastardly deeds. What adjustments do you think the cartels will make, and how can law enforcement stay in front of that?
Well, I hear from inside sources that this also creates a problem for the Mexican government officials because there's deals going on there. And the cartels are oftentimes, either the government's going to hold and get their share or the cartel's going to get their share. But there's going to be a lot of infighting, a lot of jockeying for nobody wants to find out that they were helping the cartel all along. Nobody wants to be ratted out for that. And then you're going to have this power vacuum along the border with the Chapitos, the Sambalas, your CJNG.
Right.
Those are all groups that are going to now be fighting for less money. It's going to be a lot less money to go around. So I think it's going to get a little dicey along the border with these cartels.
Well, Mark, and by the way, it's former Sheriff Mark Lamb, formerly of Pinal County. Well, still of Pinal County. See, I'm confused. Mark, I don't even know what to say. It's Sheriff Mark Lamb, Pinal County, Arizona. Sue me. SheriffLamb.com is the website, SheriffLamb.com. We'll get into supportoursheriffs.org in a minute. In dealing with what's going on in the cartels or on the border with the cartels, it's not like some high-level cartel person. Who is it that they use as their mules? Is it, do they go and kidnap people and say, now you've got to go and be a mule or else I'm going to kill your family? Is it somebody who's a low-level member of the cartel? Who are the frontline people that the cartel doesn't care if they get caught or killed, that are doing all the really bad stuff across the border?
You know what the sad part is? It's Americans.
Is it really?
4 years, they went from 500 million to 13 billion, which gave them all this money to be able to distance themselves from the dirty work. And so what did they do? They hired children, kids, teenagers to come down and traffic people. They hired American citizens. They hired American citizens to push drugs. They're hiring gang members in local communities across this country to sell the drugs on the back end for the cartels. So they have, let me just illustrate that point. The sheriff's office in Cochise County a year ago, there were over 4,000 border-related crimes that they booked into their jail. But a year ago, it was about 3,400. Of those 3,400, only 198 of them were here illegally. That means that all of the rest of them were Americans being employed by these transnational criminal organizations to traffic humans and drugs into this country. I think that's going to change. They're not going to have that abundance of money to be able to hire Americans at $1,000 a body for trafficking.
It's unbelievable. I did not assume that Americans were doing this, but it makes sense if they're dumping a bunch of money their way. But let me ask you this, because you've dealt with the border for many years. When the people would come across the border during Biden, not Trump, during Biden, the kids would have wristbands on, right? And then there would be some phone number that you had to call. And then ICE was forced by this administration, or that administration, by Mayorkas and the other idiots, to just call the number and say, yeah, come and get them. And then, Mark, we start hearing about 300 to 500,000 kids that are missing. Do we literally not know where those kids are? Did we just hand them over to anybody without any idea whether they were a relative or not?
Yeah, that's for real. You know, a lot of them had the same address written down on either the wristbands or on their actual arms or on a piece of paper. And then they were so overwhelmed. It's not Border Patrol's job to find out where these kids got to go. They just pass them on to another government organization, which was then shipping these kids off to these addresses. But the majority of these addresses were probably the cartel's addresses. And then what they can't do is now they can't find these kids, in the sense that when they reach out, they didn't show up for court, or they can't get a hold of the people that they send them to, or they show up and there's nobody at the address. Those are the reasons why they're saying that there was over 300,000 children that they couldn't find, because they can't find them.
Is there any doubt, Mark, that these kids are either being used as drug mules or sex trafficked, or they're not just at somebody's house that's taking care of them? These people are being used as just human slaves, right?
There's no doubt. The question is how many? But one is too many, Joe. And yeah. I remember on The View, Dr. Phil was telling the ladies on The View, and don't get me wrong, I don't watch The View, so let's clear that up.
Well, you're not allowed to. You're a man. We're not allowed to watch The View. That's true.
But Dr. Phil was telling them this. He says, look, a lot of these children are ending up in the hard labor or the sex trade. And one of them had the audacity to say, is it some of them or is it all of them?
Wow.
You know, the fact is, if it's one of them, it's a problem. But it's a really high number of these kids are being put in hard labor or the sex trade.
It's Sheriff Mark Lamb, Pinal County, Arizona, retired. Go to SheriffLamb.com, SheriffLamb.com. Follow him on all the social media as well. I think you're still beating me on Instagram, but I'm coming, Mark. I'm telling.
You're coming with.
I'm coming with the heat, man. No, we have to do another one of those things where we share our reel. When I was in Arizona, we did that. Did very, very well. Let me ask you this: is the reason why the border crossings between actual ports of entry, is the reason why it's down so much because people have gotten word that Trump isn't playing? Is it because of actual enforcement at the border? Is it both? Is it more one than the other? Because I get the feeling that people know they're not going to get $5,000 on a card. They're not going to get a free phone, free stay at a luxury hotel. They probably won't come. So is it one over the other or not?
No, it's a combination of it. But really, what I think the most important piece is this administration changed the messaging immediately, and their actions were in line with the messaging. And now there's reports of these groups turning back around and going back somewhere. They're not continuing on their trek. Listen, Joe, if you had sold everything you had and you raised $5,000 to $10,000, would you take the chance of paying that to the cartel with no guarantee that you're going to make it in?
No, no way.
That's now removing people. Remember that $5,000 to $10,000 is probably the equivalent of $50,000 to $100,000 for American families. So the average American is not going to put that money out if it's not a sound investment. And now that this administration is securing the border and enforcing the law, these folks are a little bit more concerned that that's not a sound investment anymore.
You were the first guy. By the way, I just checked Instagram. I am kicking your ass. I passed you. That's weird. Mark, what's going on? Raise your game.
Instagram's got their boot on my throat. They won't let it off.
Well, I'll help. I promise I will. You were the first guy, and boy, you took a lot of heat for this. You told the story of up to $5,000 free cash on some card that the taxpayers were paying for everybody who's coming across illegally. You had actual proof. You were showing the cards. How did you stay strong through that? And I'm not kissing up. I mean, you literally could have just folded very quickly, but instead you said, no, I've got proof. They were fact checking you, debunking you, calling you a liar. How do you find strength in knowing that you know what you know and you're not going to have somebody push you around?
You know, Jordan Peterson has a great quote. He says, you have to have faith in the redeeming power of truth. And when you know it's the truth and when you know it's what's right, it doesn't matter how hard it gets. You got to stand in the storm. You got to stay in there. And 3 weeks after that, Joe, then all these things started coming out that the UN admitted they'd given $1.6 billion in gift cards to people coming into this country.
Yep.
State of Washington admitted they were giving gift cards and checks out. Other NGOs started admitting they were giving gift cards. I knew it was the truth, so I wasn't going to be bullied into saying to not standing by the truth. But you know what? They never corrected that. If you go on some of those sites, it still says that my information or my video was false.
Wow.
The reality is they're the ones that are lying. They're the ones that are false. And they were shills for the government.
100%. Sherifflam.com. Follow him on social media everywhere. When you were still in office and you were dealing with all this border stuff, were you in contact with FEMA? Did FEMA send you guys any money in Pinal County, Arizona? I just don't understand. FEMA admitted on their own website, their .gov website, that they spent $1.4 billion between the two recent fiscal years. $1.4 billion just helping out illegals get, again, food, shelter, clothes, free money, all that stuff. Then they lied about it and said they didn't use any of FEMA money, but again, it's on the website. So when you're actually frontline with the Sheriff's Department, Pinal County, Arizona, do you deal with FEMA on that level or not?
No, FEMA wasn't giving us money. They were giving NGOs money. They were giving $650 million last year. And like you said, before that, it was like $700 million.
Right.
It comes through the Shelter and Services Program through FEMA, through DHS. And they were taking that money that should have been around to use for the people in North Carolina,
yes,
California. But instead, they used that money and they were shoveling it out towards the NGO as well. Right before the election and right before Trump took over, President Trump took over, they were shelling that money out, getting rid of it before the new administration came in. But it was $650 million that was allocated for the Shelter and Services Program last year. They probably gave more than that, but
well, I'm sure they probably did. USAID probably sent some money that we can't find. Having said that, that was never supposed to be FEMA's job. As you said, it's supposed to be for Western North Carolina, maybe East Palestine, Ohio. Maybe it should be for the Southern California fires, as you said. So FEMA's job was never to do that. In fact, I'll have the former administrator, Michael Brown, on tomorrow to talk about what the job is supposed to be. But let me ask you this. If FEMA would not have supported those NGOs, would that not have slowed the traffic into Pinal County and all across the border? FEMA literally, by spending money to the NGOs, they were incentivizing illegal immigration, no?
Absolutely. You know, I was very vocal about this, Joe. I kept saying that these NGOs were aiding and abetting in the trafficking of human beings. When I was face-to-face with Mayorkas at a sheriff's conference, one of the last things I said to him is, you have to tell President Biden to stop funding these NGOs. Not only did they ignore that, they just continued to fund them. The NGOs were a big problem. That's why people kept coming into this country, because they were getting a soft landing from taxpayer dollars funneled through these NGOs. The reason why they use the NGOs, Joe, and this is what happened with me when I brought that up, when I did that video, is because the government can say it's not us, because the government was giving it to NGOs. They were actually the ones buying the gift cards, the plane tickets, and all that stuff, the
Right.
hotel rooms. And the government would say, not us. But it was them. They were giving the money to the NGOs. The NGOs were doing the dirty work.
Well, it's like Fauci saying I didn't do gain of function. I gave money to somebody else who then they did the gain of function. And at the end of the day, Fauci did the gain of function. So you're right. They can try to circumvent it all they want. These NGOs have to be defunded because they're literally giving maps and giving food and shelter along the way. Here's how you get to that border. And that's not okay. Why would I ever want to pay for that? It doesn't make any sense. It's Mark Lamb, former sheriff, Pinal County, Arizona. Go to sherifflamb.com. Tell me about supportoursheriffs.org. What is this?
So we just started an organization called Support Our Sheriffs Foundation. There is no real mechanism in place to help sheriff's offices across this country, whether it's with resources, whether it's with training, or in those unfortunate incidents where somebody is seriously injured or killed in the line of duty. We want to be able to swoop in, hand that family a check, and be able to help them, help those agencies get the training that they need, help them have the resources and the technology they need to be able to do their jobs well. And this is going to be a nationwide thing. We kicked it off at the National Sheriff's Office Winter Conference in D.C. a couple of weeks ago. We're going to be just rolling it out this year. So if you want to come support us, come to supportoursheriffs.org. We're going to be doing great things, and it's a way that you can support the great men and women of our sheriff's offices across this country.
And if you need my help, make sure that you let me know. Supportoursheriffs.org. I love the organization. I'm a big, strong supporter of the blue, but sheriffs are the last line of defense, honestly, between the people and bureaucracy. Sheriffs are elected by the people, as you very well know. Police chiefs aren't. They're appointed, they're hired by a city council, a county commission, whatever. I'm not anti-police chief, don't get me wrong, but they're answerable to some bureaucracy. You guys aren't, right?
That's right. We are standalone. We represent the people. That's the beauty of the sheriff. The sheriff's sole responsibility is to represent the people that elected him to that office. And it is such an important position. It is the last line of defense for our freedoms and protecting us in this country. While there's police agencies do great jobs, the sheriff's is a state constitutionally elected position, and
Right.
It is important for freedom.
Go right now, supportoursheriffs.org. Go and support this great organization. Go and follow Sheriff Mark Lamb right now on all the socials. Maybe, Mark, you can catch up to me. I appreciate you coming on, brother. Listen, keep up the great work. Let's do this again very soon. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, my man. We're back after this. Stay right here.